Okay, perfect. Welcome, everyone. I'm going to start by introducing Wendy. Wendy Elliott is the Corporate Director of Family Services at Promise Behavioral Health and has dedicated her career to helping families and relationships thrive in recovery. She is passionate about creating opportunities for education, support, and meaningful connection with loved ones throughout the treatment journey. Wendy is deeply committed to strengthening the recovery process by focusing on the vital role of relationships in family systems. As a licensed clinician and marriage and family therapist, Wendy uses evidence-based, trauma-informed practices that are designed to support families in a compassionate and practical way. Beyond her work at Promises, she runs a private practice where she blends her experience with the expertise with a unique culinary approach to foster relationships and growth. Wendy earned her MFT degree at Drexel University as a licensed to practice in Pennsylvania. Happy to have her back. And today our topic is the power of families and connection in recovery. You want to go to the next slide? Okay, so this is our family of treatment centers at Promises. We are all trauma informed, evidence based, and focusing on our outcomes of clients. So, including with PBHU, which has been a new chapter for Promises, our clinical programming has also taken a huge growth for at the Promises. So, we have 4 treatment centers in Texas, our flagship in Tennessee, the Ranch, Tennessee, and then in Pennsylvania, Massachusetts, Georgia, and Florida. Both Promises Atlanta and Promises DFW have not opened yet, but they are soon to open. So we're happy to be growing in those areas. You can go to the next slide. If anyone ever has any questions about Promises or where we're located, you can also email pbhu@promises.com and I'll put you in touch with the right people. But for today, our CE process, so you are required to stay for the full training if you need CE credits. I know it's the end of the year that we need to make sure we get those, and I want to make this as seamless as possible for everybody. So try not to miss more than 10 minutes of the training because you have to be there for 90% to receive credit. If you registered through Zoom, I have your email. You are here. You don't need to send it to me again. I promise you are good to go. Be sure that you are also using your own device. If that's okay, if you switch from computer to phone back to your computer, I will see all of that. Just make sure that you're not sharing a computer or sharing a phone with someone else because it's one sign in per device. After the training, you'll receive an email from JotForm, and that's going to be where you receive that survey. So make sure you fill out that survey before next Friday. Remember, the holidays are here, so try to get that done today if you can. I do send it out within 2 or 3 hours of this training. So once you receive that, try to fill it out as soon as you can, because right then and there, it will email you back your certificate. So there's no waiting period of that. If you ever feel like there's a lag or you're waiting for that certificate, check your spam. And that's the same thing for the survey as well. So if you don't receive a survey by the end of the day today, go ahead and email me and say you didn't receive it and check your spam first because it does sometimes go there. Um, and then lastly, these are 2 credit hours from NADAC and NBCC. All the slides and resources that Wendy speaks about today, that will go out in a separate email next week. Next slide. During the webinar, you'll see a chat box and a Q&A box. So for the chat box, those are all questions for me. If you have questions about how you're receiving the CEs, webinar functions, all of that, I'm happy to answer those there. And I want to keep the Q&A dedicated for only questions for Wendy. So as those questions come in, I will then send those to Wendy. We can keep that nice and clean and I don't miss anybody's questions. And like I said, the recording, the slides, and resources will go out next week.
Excellent. Thank you, Callie. All right, well, I have my glass of water. I'm ready to get started. You'll hear my voice for the next hour and 45 minutes or so. We'll try to take a break at about the halfway point. If you need to get up and move around, feel free to do so. So whether you are here because the topic interests you, or you're looking for more tips and tricks for working with families, or you simply need the CE credits, I appreciate you taking 2 hours out of your day. If you're able to sit back and take it all in, fantastic. If you are one of the many who may be trying to multitask, today, take a minute or two right now to focus in on these objectives because I will be going through these objectives in order. Excuse me. So you can kind of like know when you want to key in on to listen specifically for any of this information. That way, you know when to dial in, as I say. So just to kind of read through these objectives, at the conclusion of training, the participants will be able to define the term natural supports as it pertains to crisis planning and management, be able to differentiate between the various natural supports and identify ways to engage those natural supports in treatment and the recovery process. List 4 critical clinical reasons natural supports need to be included into the treatment process. Understand how family-based approaches and family-centered recovery supports help foster resilience and boost protective factors. List 2 reasons and how treatment outcomes are increased by enhanced family involvement. So if you were with me back in March when I did the training on trauma-informed approaches and working with families, there's a little bit of overlap here, but really what we're going to be focusing in on today is a very strength-based space with when we talk about that power, and we're going to talk about that word power in a little while. But that why is it that we're doing that, right? The research that recently, here's a little bit of it here, from the effectiveness of couple and family interventions. There was a decades review done in 2020, looking through all evidence-based practices between research that was done between 2010, 2019. And it's a really interesting sort of journal in which you can kind of look through all of their findings. But some of the notable findings that I just highlighting here is that while the benefits of couples therapy for depression equal the benefits of individual therapy, couples approaches has the added benefit of improving the couple relationships functioning. Couple and family-based therapies are shown to be superior to bona fide individual and group-based therapies. Therefore, SUD treatment programs and practitioners should routinely offer couple and family therapies as a standard of care options. So given some of the conclusions of those research synthesis, it bears a minute to think like, okay, then how do we do it, right? If we're doing it one way for so long, how is it that we can begin to integrate more family connection space inside of behavioral health? When you think of the word family, so first of all, just a little bit of background. My work has always been with systems. And then when I moved into the system of working inside behavioral health as a therapist, I've been able to work with families at all levels of care, from like detox, residential, PHP, ILP, and long-term recovery. So I am a family therapist. That is my training, and that is where most of my clinical space is. But in this particular training, I'm going to be really sitting inside the framework of like the residential level of care. And I will be talking about how that then can extend into outpatient and beyond. But that's kind of like the framework from which I will be, excuse me, talking about. So I have a little bit of I'm recovering from something. So my throat gets clogged. I'll just take a minute. So feel free to ask any questions and I'll try to answer them as we go along. All right, when you look at this slide and you even just read that sentence, when you think of the word family, what do you think of? The word family itself can be a trigger, right? It can be a trigger for our clients. It can be a trigger for us. It can be a trigger for the organization in which we are working with. And so I want us all to take a moment to stop and pay attention to yourself. When I talk about family, what comes up for you? What are you feeling? What are you feeling in your body? What are the sentences that are formulating inside of your brain? Where does your own regulation sit, right? You're like, yeah, cool, this is great. I want to talk about families. This is like, ooh, I'm really interested to see what she has. Families are really kind of a lot of work. Or, man, I didn't really have a family, and there are people that don't have families. We all have history with the word family. And so being able to recognize for yourself right now, even before we get started, is how that you will then be interacting with this information. because our ability to synthesize new information and make sense of what's being presented really is determined a lot by where we are in our own regulation. Think about the same thing with our clients, right? If our clients are in a dysregulated state and we try to teach them something new, it doesn't stick so much, right? They have a hard time like grasping that information, which we know from a trauma-informed approach is that's why we repeat, right? We repeat and repeat and repeat because our clients' regulation status changes over time as they gain more skills and they learn how to take care of themselves and they learn to understand what's going on. That being said, we're humans, right? And we have our own stuff. And so being able to pay attention to ourselves as we're walking through this information about how the power of families can support recovery is that might be coming up for us. And so I just want to give you both permission and the space to like recognize that may be coming up for you. So family as just, it's a natural support, right? They exist, right? But who are they? They are households in which we live. They can be the primary way we pass on cultural traditions and teach how to interact with other people. They could be the basis for child rearing and establishment of rules. Families can definitely be complex in their definition, their roles, responsibilities, and interaction. And then when you insert something like substance use disorder or mental health crisis, those definitions, roles, responsibilities, interactions change, right? They change in order to keep everyone safe, in order to function. Intertwined in the recovery process is essential and often complicated ways, supportive and or chaotically or both. What we want to use as our definition of family here is from SAMHSA, that it's whoever's got your back. So I would speak a lot in this presentation about systems. And, you know, if those of you who've gone through an MFT program, the word systems makes, you know, it's really the framework from which we do our work. For those of you who have not had the experience of going through like a systems class or something like that, when I talk about systems, it's kind of like that organizational space. So you know, you might have the system of like, think about it inside your body, you have your digestive system, right? So you have all the different parts of that are working together to create that entire system, your circulatory system, right? Your neurological system. But then there's systems like your car is a system, a school is a system. A system is a combination of factors that play into the functioning of that system. So when you think about roles within families, there can be a lot of ways in which roles show up that we see as providers, right? We might say, oh my goodness, the family, they're enabling, they're codependent, they're reactionary, right? Those are some of the ways in which families interacted in their role inside of that system. Maybe they might have the role of like the protector, right? Somebody in that family system is the protector. Somebody in that family system is the caretaker. Somebody's the whistleblower. Somebody is the savior. Somebody's the informant, the instigator, the confidant, the lost one, right? There are a lot of different roles within our family systems. And our identified patient, our client, has one of those roles. And then the other people inside of the system have different roles. And then we tend to kind of judge whose roles are happening. What I want to say is that it's not a bad thing to have all of these different roles fulfilled, right? So we don't need to pathologize it. It's not pathologizing. It serves really important functions in the functioning of that family. So knowing that in acute care, the residential level of care, that you aren't going to change the fabric of the family, right? That fabric has been interwoven. It is what it is. And that's the information we have to work with, to utilize to move them forward inside recovery. That can be really helpful in gaining our ability to have compassion for every member and every role inside of that family. Right? Does it mean that they're going to be stuck having those roles forever? No. Hopefully over time, as the system stabilizes and systems are moving, learning recovery language, getting all of their care taken, have a care plan in place that it further along in the recovery process is they can begin to explore those roles and the ways that it's serving a function well and what ways in which it's no longer going to be working for them and reestablishing roles as they move forward. So what is this utilizing force inside of a family? Organizing force inside of a family, sorry. Usually it's the patient or the disease or the symptoms that they exhibit, right? So you think about something like self-harm or using, isolation, erratic behavior, suicidal ideations or attempts, anything that invokes the fear or threat of life to anyone in the family. That becomes the organizing force. And as soon as that organizing force shows up inside the system, everybody does their role, right? And everyone does their role in order to keep everyone safe, right? And so that is really great information for us as therapists to understand how their system works, because as we begin to move away from these behaviors that are the organizing force, those people who had certain roles can be a little bit lost. And for them to be able to recognize that that's a good thing is a really important first step inside of family work. Excuse me. So who can be a natural support? It could be your spouse, your parent, relatives. I have a real affinity to working with siblings. Siblings hold such a unique role inside of family systems. It's also one of the most under-researched group relationships inside family of therapy because there are so many variables. Oldest, youngest, male, female, age, span of age, different parents, same parents. All of that really can make the studying of siblings a little bit more cumbersome. However, there's nobody potentially more intimate with our clients than their sibling, right? They were raised at the same time. They knew them when they were young and they knew them when they were old, right? Your parents had a life before you were born. Your children didn't know you before you were born. Your spouse didn't know you before they met you, right? So, but siblings tend to be the ones who really get the full history of, of our clients. Old or newly formed friendships, community connections and resources, peers met inside treatment or support groups, sponsors, inside promises. There's an alumni association that the alumni form relationships that can offer support. And you could think about others, right? Who else could those be? Because crisis-related issues often have a disruptive, stressful, challenging impact on the person seeking care and their family members and significant others. So I want to take a minute and think a little bit outside of the box, right? Who else could be these natural supports? Sometimes we think about they need to be individuals, but it also can be organizations. This is where some of the cultural context of our clients comes into place. Some cultures have a huge, coworkers. That's a great one. Communal value systems. So then there might be like spiritual organizations, right? Your church, your synagogue, your mosque, your temple. There could be like the element of service of that giving back by your identified patients. So like working in food kitchens or environmental activism, a recovery community. There are so many different other ways that there is support for our clients in a way that really like sits inside of their value system. Peer support, and then doing life together with peers, right? Doing activities, whether, we're going to go to a baseball game together, we're going to take a walk together, is recognizing that it doesn't have to be a family member or somebody that they knew before going into treatment. They can also be those that they develop afterwards that continue to support their recovery process. Some of the biggest supports of those that have communal value system is to be accountable to systems bigger than themselves. And then we as therapists, especially if we're really trying to brainstorm, support systems that they feel they can engage with, is using kind of this as another way to kind of go through it. I like some of the other ones that are coming through on the chat. I see those. Could be a professor for college students. Absolutely. Teachers get that a lot. My very first career as a middle school teacher, and that you get those students that really would lean on you for support in different ways. Absolutely. Different needs from different people. Okay. So one of the objectives was the why, right? If any of you have had the pleasure of being in Trish Caldwell's trainings, any of them, she likes to use a lot of metaphors, and I've picked up from her over the years because they're brilliant. I love to push a metaphor. Is the metaphor of the a marathon, right? Recovery is a marathon. So when you think about four critical reasons why families need to be included, when you think about recovery as a marathon, let's push that metaphor forward. If you are going to run a marathon, which is your recovery, and you are inside treatment, you're getting fitted for your shoes, right? You're learning about how to take care of your body, how to do the basic exercises, learning about your gait, right? Starting to do a little jogging. And then you continue along your recovery until you are ready to run that marathon. And then we have our support systems. And support, they say, I'm going to support you, right? What does that support look like if you're going to run a marathon? It can look a lot of different ways. It can be like, hey, I'm going to cook you really nice meals, or we're gonna do our jogs together. We're going to, we'll go shopping and buy you good shoes. But it's an understanding and walking alongside of our people. Some like get in the ring and they go ahead and run the marathon right alongside them, right? And different people have different roles based off of the needs of that system. And yet, sometimes there are those that say they are supporting their loved ones running their marathon, but then they don't want to know anything about it. And they just tell me when they run it successfully. That's the only thing I need to know, right? You know those families. And that for us that's not the support that we know that is needed inside of that system. So we have to get creative to find those people who want to run alongside of them, that want to support them with their medical, their nutrition, their social needs, whatever it is along that marathon way. So when you think about four critical reasons that family need to be included, kind of like the why. So social connections, interpersonal rupture and repair build resiliency, which can build post-traumatic growth, which can inspire hope. I like to say the opposite of addiction is connection, right? Let's start by getting ourselves connected. Second one, families need to learn the language of recovery and the importance of getting regulated. Families can remain stuck in the experience of the most recently lived crisis. There was an event that then their loved one went into treatment. Loved ones getting stabilized, getting cared for, 24 hours, 7 days a week care. They are starting their recovery journey, and the family is at home stuck inside of that crisis. They're stuck in that space of addiction or a mental health crisis, suicidality, a suicide attempt, any of those things. And that's where the family is until they have care, right? If crisis created an opportunity for a loved one to seek treatment, even if the patient receives that care, the family is stalled out in that crisis mode. So learning the value of regulation and recognizing the need for it is a really important first step inside of recovery. And that's where we come in, right? That's where, when we are connecting with those families, helping them recognize their own need for care, right? Their own need to know, to begin to learn the language of recovery so that they don't stay stuck inside of that crisis. Families may know information that our parents may or not be able to tell us. Those of you who've been working in behavioral health for a while probably recognize this to be true, right? Our clients, when they come in, are not always complete historians. Their experience within their own mental health crisis or within their substance use is not going to be the same experience that those that are surrounding them during that time have. And so having conversations with family members and our clients and like talking through an experience can really lend insight for everybody in the room, right? And being able to give that information, which is really valuable, particularly in evaluating like the nature and severity of why the patient is seeking treatment. since the patient may be impaired in his or her own ability to provide that information accurately. And a fourth reason is increasing collateral information to better serve the patient and his or her needs. When I think about collateral information with family connection, it's it can be tempting to try to do like behind each other's backs. Like, let me just talk to you for a little while and get some extra information from you. And then that can create, from a trauma-informed lens, a lack of transparency, which can be dangerous for the therapeutic alliance with our client. And so what kind of collateral information do you get when you are connecting everyone in the room together? Well, the collateral information of just watching a system interact with one another lends insight into their strengths, into their risks associated with their relationships as it can intersect with recovery. It becomes less of us as therapists trying to convince a client about you might want to not be, this is right. It becomes less of that and more that the client is able to come to their own realization themselves and then us supporting them through it. There are times that, inside of early recovery, a client might say, oh yeah, I'm going to go home and I'm going to live with my parents. Yeah, I know they drink all the time, but it's fine. I'm going to be able to do that. And I was like, well, let's have a connecting conversation. And you get in that conversation and maybe they're defensive or under the influence themselves, or the client's idea of what he thinks or she thinks is going to be a good connection. And then they get to the end of it and he's like, I think maybe might need to explore some other options for housing when I leave here to find a more supportive environment. We aren't the ones that have to try to convince them they can see it for themselves, which is a really powerful, because then the recovery is owned inside of themselves and not owned inside of us as therapists that we then have to give to them. Really great for collateral information. So why do families need to be involved? 5 potential opportunities for family therapy. Being a part of recovery, not the addiction. Exploring normative family roles. Developing and exploring their strengths. Problem solve their own issues. Or address their own issues surrounding addiction. So when you look at these things, you're like, whew, that can be a daunting undertaking, especially at the residential level of care. However, building some awareness increases the likelihood of an aftercare plan that includes a family component, right? Encourages family to engage in their own recovery and intersecting with their loved one along the way. They walk alongside of one another in their experience, building intimacy, connection, strength, and resiliency. Probably seen this slide before. It's a favorite. Most human beings simply cannot tolerate being disengaged from others for any length of time. People who cannot connect through work, friendship, or families usually find other ways of bonding. One of the ways, by taking part in observing and facilitating relational interaction, can give us clarity as therapists of the function of certain behaviors with our clients. Our clients have certain behaviors that they exhibit when they are trying to connect with some other people, right? And recognizing for our clients that these are things that have worked for them in their past. Maybe they have attention-seeking behaviors, avoidance behaviors. Maybe they're real jumpy, right? Like they have a lot of media inside of the space. Sexual advances towards other clients or to staff, fighting, just needing to pick fights all the time, maybe stealing, hiding. All of these behaviors, when we know that our clients are prone to these particular behaviors, and then we are able to bear witness to interactions with their loved ones and themselves, it starts to lend some clarity about how it is and why it is the client is doing what they're doing to get their needs met. Because our clients need connection and they are doing how they know to get it in the best way that they know how with the skills that they have in the moment. And it's all just really it's really good information for treatment planning, for deciding, how it is that we're going to move forward so that we can begin to address the need and not the behavior. Crisis impacts everyone. Mental illness, substance abuse, and other complex issues are not experienced in a vacuum. Family and friends are impacted too. For a system that is used in a crisis without getting treatment themselves, family may engage in old behaviors, protecting the crisis. Families and their loved ones both need skills to manage the stressful and sometimes traumatic experiences of what led to treatment. I had a client once, this is in an outpatient situation, that they started doing family therapy in outpatient, and she said to me, "Can I bring the sweatshirt that the paramedics had to cut off of him when he OD'd on the airplane so we can refresh his memory and make him wake up?" Right? Or like families who take videos of their behaviors while they were drunk, right? Or there's with our clients who might have like paranoia that Big Brother is watching, and they're like subjecting their loved ones to certain activities while they are under the influence. All of these things are happening that are impacting our families in a way that the client themselves may not even recognize, right? And so when we can help validate the experience of our families and hold the space and safety for our clients, then everyone feels heard. And then these particular, like, I need to prove it to you that it's happening by showing this, becomes less important. When you think sometimes families, when another thing just kind of keep in mind is that when we have a client inside of our care and they're doing what they're doing, they're going to groups, they're following their treatment plan, they're taking their medication, they're making connections, they're putting together an aftercare plan. Sometimes our families are out of a job. And that can be terrifying if that is their role within a system. And so they can inadvertently try and maintain chaos because it's so much a part of their identity to need to be able to care for them. We get a lot of emails from family members who are like, hey, they don't like the food, they don't like their roommate, right? I'm not sure that the medication is good for them. They have opinions, and we can be like, oh, the family just needs to back off. But when you think about what their role in their loved ones' lives has been up to this point, and they are trying to figure out how to manage their own emotional dysregulation, that us being able to be sturdy and be like, we got them and we've got you, right? Being able to actually recognize the fact that they do not know what to do with themselves now that you are doing it for them. And it's terrifying. And when people are scared, they behave in a way that they know to get their needs met, right? So then our families are just like our clients in that way. They are experiencing similar emotions, similar fears, similar, like, I don't know what's happening, and behaving in a certain way. And we're like, families are bad. It's too much work, but I can take care of my client. They are our clients, right? They are all part of the same system, and they are all having experiences with that. It's a good thing. There's that rippling effect, right? For every one person lost to OD or who battles with PBHU, there are countless family members, community members, and friends standing in their shadows. The question is who is treating them? So the whole is greater than the sum of all the parts. Probably have heard the term equifinality. It's a concept used primarily in systems theory. This is a big definition, but bear with me. Psychology and various other disciplines to describe the idea that a particular end state or outcome can be reached through multiple different pathways or processes. In simpler terms, it means that there's more than one way to achieve the same result. This concept contrasts what we call causal determinism, which suggests that there's a specific cause leads to a specific outcome, which then would imply that if we did a specific fix, that everybody would be fine. We all work in this field, that we know that not to be, we'd all be all out of a job pretty quick. Wouldn't that be nice if we can find out what the cause is so that we can change the effect? In systems thinking, equifinality recognizes the complexity and the flexibility of systems where different factors or initial conditions can lead to the same end result, right? So we are going to highlight flexibility and adaptability. Multiple pathways can lead to the same result, recognizing the complexity of systems and processes. It challenges that the idea that a single predetermined cause leads to specific outcomes. So what can happen with us as therapists? Let's just talk about our experience as a therapist. When a therapist have their own idea in our head about how a family can be better, right? It's natural. You're going to watch these interactions. You're going to watch these phone calls that you make, these video calls, in-person time. And we're like, oh, I see what it is, right? We see it. We say it. What can end up happening is that it becomes about our ability to try to get them to be fixed, right? It does a disservice to the family's uniqueness and strengths that they already have. There could be a lot of cultural implications that show up in this. I remember doing supervision with a therapist one time who, and I'm not going to, she was a female and she had a male client, but there were racial and ethnic differences between these two people. And the therapist came to me and said, I don't know what to do. He wants to do a family session with his dad, his wife, and his brother. I think that's too much. To which I asked her, I said, what makes you think it's too much? And she's just like, he doesn't need to share all of his stuff with so many people. And I said, how much of that has more to do with you? When you have a crisis, what is it? What is it? She's like, oh my goodness. I've always been told by my mom, keep it tight, keep it close, tell it just to the one person. Everybody doesn't need to know your business. But for this client, the roles and the way his system was structured, he needed all three people for different reasons. And they had a transparent sort of cultural layout inside of their family. So it became the therapist had a feeling that they didn't want to have a family session. And the client is like, no, those are my people. Right. So that's the therapist's work. She had to kind of be like, okay, this is normal for them. It's different for me. I don't know their family better than they know their family. Right. And so being able to kind of challenge herself to go ahead and have this session with all three members of the family. And she says, well, what happens if there's two? I'm outnumbered. What if it goes bad? And I'm like, hello, do you run group? She's like, yeah. I said, how many people are in group? There can be 8, 12 people in group. Like, have they ever all like had high emotions at the same time? Sure. Have you been able to navigate that and contain that and hold boundaries around that? Absolutely. That's what I do. Right. We can do the same thing with our families. But what can happen as therapists, like that countertransference is so, so strong with families, is that if you were raised like respect dad and dad starts getting angry, we might have trouble being able to say, I need you to stop. Right? Because we are feeling we're being disrespectful, and that's our stuff. Right? But if we can see our families as a group that we are used to navigating, it can give us the courage and the confidence and the competence to go ahead and have these conversations. Curiosity goes a long way inside family phone calls. And if you can learn one thing here is to recognize that families, I'm going to say this and you can push back and say, I don't believe you, but families are not dysfunctional. Every family that we work with is functioning on some level. They are. They're here. What they're recognizing is they want to function differently, more effectively, more connecting, more supporting, but they are functioning. And how are they functioning? They are functioning with their strengths. And it is our job to help them find their strengths so they can build upon those strengths. Because those strengths is the power that you will have to move towards recovery. Those strengths are the things that make them uniquely them, that they can be proud of, that they can feel good about, that they know that they are not the train wreck they have been told that they are by everyone in society, right? And our ability as therapists to include that system inside of recovery is such a vote of confidence in their ability to recover. That's all I have to say about that right now. And so a lot of the time it's a matter of just slowing down the process, not fixing anything today, right? We are finding the things that work and emphasizing the things that we can utilize to move the whole system forward in recovery. So the importance of family, we've been kind of, it's a little bit on repeat, but isolation can be viewed in the experience of substance use and mental health. Healing is through the connection to others and themselves. So involving others outside of treatment becomes a critical element to supporting long-term recovery. If the only people they connect to are the people that they have inside of a residential recovery space, then the only time they feel connected to other human beings is when they're inside of treatment, right? And so then when they leave and they're not connected and they need to be connected, what do they need to do in order to feel connected? They need to re-engage in behaviors that get them back inside of treatment. We become their way of being connected. And that's not sustainable. It's also really risky health-wise for our clients. So helping them being connected to the outside while they're still inside so that that becomes their goal instead of the goal of staying connected with us. Involving people outside of treatment gives people a better chance of thriving in their recovery life. I like this quote: the best predictor of your current mental health is your relational health or connectedness. Try that point one last time. So this whole PowerPoint is titled Power, right? We kept using this word power. So what do we actually mean by power? Because people who are like power hungry or power grabbing, right? Because that's that strength, that force, that might, when we think of the way in which power can be used. But other synonyms to power is also energy or potency or effectiveness. And that's the power. It's like the power of a river that feeds a dam, not the need to lord over someone. It's a distinct difference, right? It's a nuance of the word power. When I think about a river, right? And you have this river, all these water droplets, all of this energy, this water energy flowing down. That water energy is the family system, right? And it's going from somewhere to somewhere. And our client is inside of that. And historically, what has been is just like, let's stop everybody. Have you ever tried to stop a river? You can't, right? It'll go around you. It can't be stopped. The amount of force necessary to stop moving water is more force than the power that is already going past of you, right? It's a waste of energy. They are inside of that river. They are in that river. So we need to recognize how that power is moving, and then we can divert over time, right? We are shifting the direction that the river is flowing. The end space where it was going before they went into recovery and the end space that it's going to go to when they're inside of recovery are two different places. And so don't just need one person, our client, trying to make that entire river shift into a different direction, right? Having the entire system able to move forward in recovery shifts all that, and it's already going, right? The energy is already there. For those of you with physics background, that is moving. There is so much energy. There's so much energy that somebody learned that if you put a dam in there to power combines, you can power whole cities. There's so much power inside of that moving river. Motivation for family can be stress and fear, but it can also be connection and empowerment. So how do we harness this already existing energy? How do we do it? Well, that's where we're going next. So how do we boost the protective part of that river and minimize the risk part of that river? First, we have to identify them. And this is part of that collateral, that's part of that connecting conversation that you're having with our families. It's part of what we do in our assessments early on inside residential level of care. So how does family-based approaches help foster resilience and boost protective factors? Well, first of all, let's backtrack a tiny bit and talk about what we mean by protective factors, risk factors, right? There could be everything like their physical health, right? If you're not feeling well. I remember having a client one time, was just really, really grumpy forever. And we're like, what's going on? And we checked like, no, therapy is fine. No, my roommates are fine. My family's fine. We just couldn't figure out what's going on. And I'm like, what in the world is happening? It's like, well, if my right toe didn't hurt so bad, I wouldn't be so distracted. Right? If you ever tried to like, you're sick, you can't do anything, right? You're in pain. Your ability to stay inside of the part of your brain where you can make decisions and move things forward is really greatly diminished. So being able to recognize like our physical health is a protective factor, a risk factor. Our social life, right? Who are our people? What we're talking about here. Our coping skills. What is our purpose? How is our self-esteem, right? So our strengths of our protective and risk factors really do lie on a spectrum. You know, if the protective factor isn't there, it's probably a risk factor. And so being able to recognize that, and how do we do that? It helps break that binary thinking where like it's bad, it's good, right? Um, some of that is through some of the assessments. So we do a BPS, right, at the beginning of treatment. And inside the BPS, it's littered with questions that gives us clues as to the protective factors inside of our clients as it pertains to families and the risk factors with our clients as it pertains to families or whoever their people are. There's some of the questions, just for example, are like, what helped you maintain free of symptoms, right? And they'll answer that question. We're like, well, when I'm engaged in my relationship, when I'm getting along with my mom, right? That helps me stay free of symptoms. Like, ooh, noted, protective factor, right? Really details of admission questions, like what brought you here? Well, I found I was isolating from everyone and my family was pulling away from me and then I isolated more. Ooh, noted, right? Suicide assessments of protective factors. Though in the suicide assessment, it'll actually ask, do you have people? Who are they? And they're like, yes, and these are the people and how. Being able to describe any family or friendship problems related to your substance use or mental health. These are all questions inside of our BPS. And then what is it that we learn? So in the next slide, it's a lot of text. And the question is when I kind of read through them, think to yourself, this client de-identified, these are all direct quotes, I de-identified these clients, but what do you hear? Do you hear protective or do you hear risk? So for example, client has a very supportive husband, kids, and mother. Client does struggle with asking for help and support when she's under a lot of stress. Protective factor, risk factor. I'd say both for different reasons, right? But you can hear it in that sentence. It's a protective factor because she claims that her husband and kids and mother are supportive. Amazing, right? And also it gives us a sense to, but her risk is when she's stressed, she doesn't ask. So now we know, oh, she has the support, she has trouble managing stress. And then that shows up, this is what happens. It's wonderful information for us as therapists. Clients' protective factors are spirituality, support from family, not wanting to burden the family, fear of death, and identifies reasons for living. Fabulous. Protective factor, family. Responsibility to family or others, living with family. That happens a lot. Sometimes we're like, I don't want to talk to my family. I'm like, well, where are you living with? Oh, I'm going to go back home to my parents, or I'm going to go back home to my spouse, or my brother, or my sister, or my best friend. I'm like, so we're going to talk to them because you're going to live with them, right? Supportive social network of family, want to go places and see things. I want to be around for my brother's wedding. Fantastic. There's so much to work with there. Great protective factors. They are very supportive. They are taking care of things at home. Wonderful. Let's connect with them so that you can feel connected to their process. Client reports his reluctance to agree to treatment, reporting that his family and partner pushed him to come here. He reports that he's only partially bought into the recovery idea and not sure if he's ready to stop drinking. Both a protective factor with a little risk factor thrown in. Start that conversation. Let's get that recovery language started for everyone. Client states that he is living with his controlling, abusive father and that he is still able to manipulate his parents and uses as he wants. And this client was going home to live with them. Ooh, risk factor. Let's have that conversation. We need to see as a therapist that interaction. What's going on? So that he can determine for himself if that's the best place for him actually to go. Hey, maybe we need to find a sober living for you. Let's find an alternative for housing. so that you can stay inside of recovery. We don't need to tell him that. We can have an interaction in which he can begin to see it. We mirror it back to him so he can begin to see it for himself. They're starting to distance themselves from me. They're all worried about my drinking. Okay, risk factor, the distancing, protective factor, bringing them back together. Client describes having very supportive people and they still have started to distance themselves from me. Yep, happens a lot. I live with my mom who expects a lot from me. Treatment was recommended to me and my parents wanted me to come. Protective factor that mom got her there. Risk factor that the stress of being inside of that might be contributing to whatever behavior she is involved in. Maybe a little codependent on mom. Love the codependency conversation. Do a webinar, just kind of like side plug if you like listening to my voice and you want to hear more about the way we support families inside recovery. Promises Behavioral Health has Tuesday night webinars, 6 Central, 7 Eastern, in which I cover different topics on different days. It's free to anyone. Feel free to join in. It's at the Promises website. You can find that information and you can just register and just show up. But one of the weeks I do on codependency. And codependency is given such a bad rap, but it's also super duper effective at keeping everyone safe. And so being able to find the strengths in codependency so that we can begin to move away from it in a way that is more interdependent and healing for everyone inside of that system. There's no shame in this game. Client risks identified as having an argument with a loved one, missing a family event, insecurity about housing. Ooh, this is really helpful. So let's say that client has a conversation with a loved one at night and they get in an argument. What is the risk for that client in that moment? I'm out of here, right? But if we've already connected with that loved one and our client inside of care, we can begin building skills to know how to navigate an argument or a conversation that goes badly in a way that does not instigate leaving ATA or doing some other behavior in which we may later regret. This is wonderful information for a way in which to begin engaging with family and our clients. Client reports isolation from everyone and impulsive sexual behaviors within the past year, putting herself in a dangerous situation. Also great information, right? Because it's telling you that she isolates, but then she needs connection. And so when she's needing connection, she puts herself into dangerous situations. So that tells us, hey, maybe we should have on your treatment plan a way for you to engage in connection in a way that doesn't put you in harm's way. Because we know isolation is a risk for you. And then the way in which you re-engage and connect with other people is also putting you at risk. So let's find a new way of doing that. So what are these clients and families' strengths? How do we tap into that power? How can we help our clients and families see their power? Last slide before we take a break. Oh, I did it right on the top of the hour. I'm so proud of myself. Given the strength of the research supporting couple and family interventions for SUD across the lifespan, it is critical to include couple and family interventions as a standard of care for SUDs. Transforming SUD services to be oriented towards relationships and their ecologies rather than individuals is an enormous task. Most practitioners work within the context of profoundly individual approach, granting supremacy to the notion of individualism, self-reliance, and generally autonomous self. So a paradigm shift towards relational interventions would invite movement towards a systemic conceptualization of SUD problems and solutions. So now how? That'll be after the break. In the meantime, if you're hoping I'm going to address any particular questions, or if you have any questions about what it is that I've covered in the first half, please send them in so that Callie can forward them on to me. And let's meet back here at 11:10. And the last question was about the geriatric population. What supports in addition to those mentioned do you recommend for this population? Many have siblings who can't be a support and children who may not be willing or able to support. That's a great question. First of all, it's important when we talk about like supports, and we're going to talk about this. You know what? I'm going to hold off because that might answer this one as we move on to the how. But feel free to, if I don't answer it, poke me again, and we can move from there. Okay. All right, here we go. Okay, so what are the barriers to engaging our natural supports? Shame. A lot of times it's shame, fear, anger, being overwhelmed, learned helplessness, all very real internal barriers for our families and our clients. And fear shows up in a lot of different ways. So, why are families not often involved? Families often do not know what treatment is all about, and they are left in the dark, right? Families can bring in themes of like moral failing, or their fear can be displayed as like animosity. And as clinicians, we can assume that they know what we mean by recovery or assessments or PHP or IOP or aftercare. I mean, I made an assumption earlier today, and I just threw out the word SUD, right? Totally made that assumption. Thankfully, somebody asked substance use disorder, right? We forget that when we are inside of this world, that what is normal for us is not necessarily what what families may know. And remember that like I said, I used to teach middle school, and they're just so much more like transparent about what everybody is feeling all the way through adulthood, right? And so recognizing that when people don't know something and they feel stupid, they will then respond in ways that are like bad. Like it's better to be bad than to be stupid. When my students were being bad, it told me they weren't understanding something and they were afraid of looking stupid, right? It is the same thing as adults, right? We do it softer, we do it a different way, but sometimes families are like, I don't want to be involved. Meanwhile, we had a phone call conversation with them and we threw out tons of jargon at them. They knew what none of it meant. They're now afraid, right? Because they don't know the language. They don't know what treatment is about. They feel like they've been left in the dark. And then instead of feeling stupid, they're just going to be like, never mind, I don't want to be a part of it. So really recognizing kind of our space of like privilege in that we know what we're talking about. They may not, and we need to be sensitive to that. It's one way families may not want to be involved. Another one is like they often focus in on the patient's behaviors as isolated rather than in context of a system. Our families will say to us, well, the client drinks because he has no self-control, right? So we know it's more than that, right? We know that it's a big, more complex issue, but why does the family need that sentence to be true, right? Fear, right? What it might be, what if it's my fault, right? What if what if I did something wrong? What if I was too enabling? Right? Fear. Another, so like if he gains self-control, his relationship will automatically be good. Big LOL to that, right? Because that's not the way it works. But often that focusing in on the patient's behaviors as like, if they just fix this behavior, then everything will be fine, right? That's pretty much codependency, right? If he's fine, I'll be fine. And so just go ahead and fix that behavior for me, and then we'll be okay as a family. I don't need to be involved in fixing the behavior. I've been trying to fix the behavior for years, right? But we know we're not fixing the behavior either, right? We are here to walk alongside our clients and finding new solutions to getting their needs met so that they don't fall back into the solutions that are harming them and the relationships. And so getting the families involved in that is such an important part of the recovery process. Another reason why families are not involved, because we as clinicians might minimize the importance of family, projecting the notions of they don't want to participate or they're not healthy for the patient. I work with a lot of therapists who are, trying to do this family work, and I hear this, and I'm like, what's happening with you? Right? something's happening with you that you don't want them to participate, or you think that they're not healthy for the patient. This is this is more to do with you than it does with our clients. And because at the end of the day, they're returning home to these very same families. We cannot save them from the life that they live unless we're going to adopt. Someone said that one time, are you going to adopt all of your clients? Right? Bring them home with you? They're going home to their people. So we believe that we are protecting our clients' autonomy, but in the end, we're pretty much protecting ourselves. Right? Patients want to focus on myself first. This one, I love this one. People are like, I just want to focus on myself, as if they were an island. But when you think about how there's over, is it like 10,000 minutes in a week, something like that? And I'm asking for like 10, 15, maybe to have a conversation with your loved one around your treatment. So we can focus on you. But we are not going to ignore the fact that when you leave here, you're going to be back inside of a social situation in which you came from, and we're not going to leave them out. And they deserve recovery just as much as you do, right? And being able to talk our clients through that so that they are open to getting their families involved. And been doing this for years, and finding ways to give the power back to them to reciprocate and care for their loved one is a very powerful tactic. I have yet to have a family say, or a client say, no, never, not going to do it. And I've had some pretty resistant clients over the years, angry, worried, shame, all of it. And in the end, people want to be well, and they recognize that being socially connected with people who can provide support and that they can allow to move forward in their recovery is a really powerful little trifecta to get people to have their family involved. I'm starting to lose my voice. Then there's us, right? Professional resistance. What barriers that our profession creates? Time, maybe the reimbursement process, logistics. I work these hours, they're working those hours, right? Logistics can be a barrier. Or even just like, I'm not a family therapist, feeling like we're working outside of our scope. All these can be barriers to us wanting to do family work. What fears or concerns in engaging families do we have? Professional competence and confidence. I mean, sure. Maybe feeling like it's too much. What if our patient's symptoms get worse? It's going to look bad on me as a therapist. If I involve the families and my patients get sicker, what happens? Like, I'm bad. I'm not good at my job, right? Maybe what are we doing that perpetuates that lack of involvement? A lot of times we co-sign on our client's fear, resistance, or indifference by saying that we are patient-centered. To challenge that, if we are patient-centered and our patient says to us, but I don't like taking medications, we were like, you're right. You don't need to take medications. Of course not, right? We would work really hard to educate and encourage our clients to take their medications. We would not let that go, right? Because we know it's essential to their recovery. Or co-signing on like, but my family triggers me. All right, so let's build some regulation skills when talking with family before we get on with them, because they're going to be part of your future. So let's get started practicing now. It sounds like we're going to need a lot of practice. Let's get practicing now, right? Or co-signing on like they won't understand. Okay. I also know that like it's too much for you in early recovery to go home and then teach everyone how to be inside of recovery. So let's do it together while you're here in a way that we can all learn the language of recovery. Think about what would happen if you're in here learning all this new language of recovery and you go home and they don't know any. They only know the language of addiction or of a mental health crisis, of suicidality. They only know that language. So then what happens? When you move back home, you guys want to communicate because you're in a relationship with each other. And what is the common language? It's the language of addiction. It's the language of harm, right? And so you in early recovery are going to try to catch them up to where you're at. That's too much. I'm here. I'm your therapist. Let's do this together. Let's get everyone moving forward inside of recovery. Or they might say, I'm not ready. Um, Trust me, if somebody asked me as a fairly stable, mentally stable person, do you want to have family therapy? I'd probably be like, nah, no, I'm not ready. Right? Of course they're not ready. Nobody's ready. Nobody wants to be ready. Right? So that's why you have us as your therapists, so we can walk alongside you and support you and build that muscle of being able to be connected to your loved one inside of recovery so that you can start to do it on your own. It's okay that you're not ready. I'm here with you, right? That is recovery centered, which is ultimately patient centered. So coming together and empowering families. I'm going to talk briefly about like scope. So like, I'm not a family therapist, right? We talk about levels of care considerations. When you think about, let's just say like the detox phase, right? We're stabilizing medically, right? We're getting comfortable, all of that. That's when like a family call at 24 hours to like, they're here, they're safe. We'll be in touch after we're stabilized, right? Um, it's the same thing for families. They're destabilized also. They need help. So being able to make that call within 24 hours saying they're here, they're safe, we're working on it, right? We'll get back to you in the next 2 days with a clinician so that we can begin connecting inside of recovery. Great. So then they step down into a residential level of care. What is that? What are we doing with our clients? We are working on emotional recognition and regulation skills, right? We are learning how it is that we are responding, what's happening inside of our brain, how we can feel proud about how we can react, how we can know if we're hot, if we're cold, if we're neutral. That's what we're working on with our clients so that they can begin to navigate life with a different feeling inside of their brain and inside of their bodies that gives them the ability to think clearer in their cortex so that they can make decisions, so that they don't choose solutions that they have in the past that have harmed them, right? So that's what we're doing with our clients in the residential level of care. Families need the same thing. And so a family phone call at 72 hours, you're doing an informal assessment as you're telling them a little bit about treatment and what's going on, and they are able to check in with their loved one and how you doing, how you feel, and what's going on. You will very quickly gather information on their emotional regulation skills and status. That tells you then, as a therapist, what it is we're going to need to be working on doing this level of care. I noticed that people will shut down or they got upset, right? And we can contain that space for them in a way that gives us the information that we need. That's that collateral information, right? So that we know when we're having our individual sessions with our client, and they're like, I just need this from my family, or I don't know how to connect. I feel bad. Like we now have real time uh, like data from having had a conversation with them and their clients. So you can watch them interact. It's so enlightening. We don't need to fix anything in that moment. We're gathering information, giving them what it is that they need in order to move forward in their own regulations. Maybe teach them a quick skill so that they can, like, let's take a break, let's take a breather, right? Need you to look outside the window. What do you notice in the sky? Like you can do a regulation activity with them in the moment so they can feel immediate relief. And it builds their confidence in the recovery process so that their own their emotional regulation will become more stabilized. Same that you do not need to be a family therapist, right? You're doing that all day long with all of your clients all this time, right? We're not talking about the down and dirty trauma or the contextual therapies and your structural therapy. We're not doing that. This is recognition and regulation within our families alongside of our clients, right? And if they're starting to find some relief in that, when you're putting together that aftercare plan, hey, listen, the PHP level of care, we're going to start integrating that, right? We're going to like working on our relapse prevention and our new roles and patterns in the world and in our relationships. We can start to like kind of break down some of like, if my role was savior and I don't need to save you anymore, how is my role as supporter? What will that look like, right? That's in that outpatient level of care. And as you move along the levels of care, your own your own confidence and competence at doing family work, you'll know when it's you've reached its limit, and then you refer out to a family therapist at that point. But knowing there's so much work you can do with families without being a family therapist, right? Is that recognize, regulate, so that they can respond in ways that they can be proud of. That is what we do at Promises. That's what it is that we do through all levels of care in a way that both supports our clients and their support systems. Right? You get to long-term recovery, you're talking about the generational patterns and your family of origin stuff and the trauma and all creating new stories. All of that, super important, cannot happen at the residential level of care. It's way too early and it's way too destabilizing for our clients. So what are some practical family care and connection tips for therapists, right? I didn't even put sessions, right? Just connection tips. What is it that we can do? So as we are thinking about that, I want to zoom out real quick and talk family therapy for a minute, so you can see where I'm my groundwork from which I'm coming from, which would be where you would get eventually, right? So consider the family from the patient's point of view. How would a patient describe the family members and vice versa? Love this. When you talk to the client and they tell you all about their family, and then you call the family and you're listening, and you're like, I see what's going on here, right? Don't need to do anything. You just see it, right? The way that they're describing something, yep, you were spot on, or oh, I see why that behavior it was showed up the way that it did. I always find it slightly ironic in the mental health space when somebody is really struggling with maybe depression or anxiety or they're bipolar or ADHD or something, and then we get on the phone call with the parent or some other like blood relative, and they have a lot of the same behaviors. And they're like, they're just so like, it makes sense, right? That these things get passed down. You came by it naturally, and I'm caring for you, so I know how to support them also. And this is all collateral. Assessing the family's effectiveness of communication, boundary setting, supportiveness or negativity, parenting skills, conflict management, understanding of substance use, mental illness. Our sturdiness as therapists allows the client and the family to try a new way of connecting. If we're freaked out by them trying to connect, they will be freaked out. But if we're like, I got you, go ahead and try to connect, we'll see how this works, then you're kind of like a spotter in a weight room, right? You have these families are trying to build a new skill that they don't have. And it's, if you've ever lifted weights and you're trying a new weight, a heavier weight or a different free weight that you know that if you do it wrong, you could get hurt, right? So what you have a spotter, and that spotter's like, I'm here. If it starts to falter, I will catch you, right? That's what we are. We're there for that. And so if we want to get stronger, we need to try a new exercise. We need to try a new thing, and we need to do it while I am also here to support you in that, right? That gives them the ability to risk something new that they may never have had a chance to do before because they've been too afraid of getting hurt. Many families can fear participation in treatment process, but don't give up. Try again. Yeah, we're not going to just like not take our medication and be okay with that. And then recognize, what does that fear look like behaviorally, right? It's going to show up somehow. Sometimes they miss your phone calls. Maybe they avoid scheduling a connection call. They're like, yeah, I'll get back to you. Right? That's fear, right? Maybe they get angry because, it's better to be bad than to be stupid, right? Fear shows up a lot of times as anger, but being able to hold that space and be able to contain that space, be able to validate their experience and move them towards trying a new way of being once they are in a regulated space. Spending time regulating, co-regulating is a wonderful skill to be walking alongside of our clients and their families. And the family therapy is working on the family system with a focus on education, support, communication skills to provide improve family functioning, interactional patterns, and to reestablish family boundaries. This is that long-term space. This is where we're like, this is what we see the first time we meet them. We want to do it then, right? But there's a lot that we can do ahead of time before that. Okay, great. Now that we know that's the framework, so how do we establish a working relationship with families? They're not our clients, right? We have our clients and we have these families. So how do we navigate that? By being curious and observing the interaction, by containing the space, by interrupting and mirroring back to slow down the process. If there is only one thing that you take away from today as a skill to try when working with families, it would be this: slow down. How do we slow the process down? Being able to hear something, pause it, repeat it back what you heard, check with the other person. Is that what you heard? No, I heard this. Is that what you meant? Is that what you said? Right? I hear that. Being like, okay, now this is how I'm rewriting that story in my brain. Now this is what I understand. Is that true? Is that what you heard? You can take one comment and have that sit in a 10-minute piece of space in a way that allows the family system, first of all, to slow their process down and for them to start to find ways to make sure that they are communicating in a way that me as a therapist could understand, but also their loved one was to begin to understand. It's that curiosity and slowing down, because every time you rephrase it and you observe and allow them to correct your interpretation, it gives a lot of space for everyone to hear the same thing multiple ways, multiple times. It builds emotional intelligence, right? It builds the muscle of being able to hear a thing and be okay. Because what can happen is we get these rapid fire information, right? And everybody becomes totally dysregulated and nobody can hear anything. And so finding ways to slow it down. Sometimes I'll say things like, hey, that sounds like a really, really big and important topic, and it deserves the time and the space to deal with effectively. So we're going to put a pin in it today. You have validated their experience, right? You are affirming that it's important. You know that it is, but you also know that if we don't slow down, everyone will become dysregulated, and then we won't be able to move forward inside of recovery. So, like I said, this is the only skill that you take away from this webinar to practice your effectiveness with working with families. Whether or not you're trained to be a family therapist, I would be eye-opening and steadying to everyone inside of that space. It's a great way to build your confidence in being able to handle multiple emotions inside of a space in families. And it also establishes such a great working kind of like cadence that people can settle into, because what's predictable is trauma informed. So when we don't do that, what ends up happening? We panic. We're like, oh, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do with these families. I don't know what to say with these families. We tend to talk too much. And then we think if I say just the right thing, or I come across as just knowledgeable about treatment enough, or like I know their loved one really well, then they will trust me and they will not cause a scene. Right. And so we end up being like the bill collector whenever like we need something from them. Like, you trust me, right? This is what I need from you. Or I used to call it like the babysitter report. Just so you know, they're going to group, they're showing up, they seem happy, Like, you are now interpreting your client's behavior in a way that you want the family to hear when you've known the client for a couple of weeks and they've known them all their lives. How can they trust that? Right? Think about it. And instead of like letting them interact with one another, because then they can see it, right? They can hear it. And then you can lend your clinical judgment and your clinical expertise to the conversation. If we only give families updates, it's another side like thing that can happen. And I'll read this in notes all the time. Called family and give them an update. What does that mean, right? If we give updates, or when we need, if we've only calling families to give them updates, or when we need something from them, this is what families think that their role is inside of recovery. So think about it. If you are essentially modeling for the family when you call and be like, okay, so they're eating, sleeping, pooping, right? They're doing all the things. They're okay. They're making friends. They're doing their homework. They're like, we do that. We have now modeled for the family what it means to be a support person inside recovery. So then what happens when their loved one comes home? They come home from a day of work and they're like, so they start asking all of those questions, which then infuriates the person, right? They're like, there's more to me than just like answering those questions. But the family doesn't know any other way to interact with their loved one inside recovery, because we haven't taught them. They haven't had any practice. And they're only doing what they know because it's what we have modeled for them, right? If we hang up the phone or shut the video call down or say goodbye, and our mouth is dry, it's an indicator that we probably talked too much, right? That worked for me when I was a brand new green baby therapist and nervous and anxious and like, am I doing it right? I would end some sessions where I felt like there was going to be tension and my mouth would be really dry. And I'm like, ooh, I worked way too hard in that session. That session was more about me than it was about them. It's a nice little like check or indicator to ourselves. It's one I use anyway. So, how do we create a strong therapeutic alliance? Well, we validate their struggles and courage. We honor their experiences and their expertise as a family. One of my favorite disarming sentences that I will say inside treatment when I see kind of like anxiety going up and like I'm afraid I'm not like communicating well, like that they're feeling it for me and they want me to understand. And I'll say, so I've known you for, and I'll look at the clock, 17 minutes now. Don't know enough about you and your family system. I don't live there. I don't understand. So we're going to take some time to kind of get to know it in a way that is helpful to you, that brings down the pressures. Like, I am not going to pretend like I am an expert in your life after knowing you for 15 minutes. That would be foolish. And it's not fair, right? So we can honor their experiences and their expertise as a family. We can listen. We create mutual conversations based on what the family's concerns are. We need to know, right? And their concerns might be enlightening to our client. I'm like, I had no idea you were concerned about that. Or yeah, totally knew that one was coming. Great. It's information. We can build respect. Every family has its own unique strength, story, and strengths. It's my favorite thing is to highlight their strengths because they don't want to believe they have any. And when you find them and you mention them and they're like, oh, yeah, we are kind of like that. Like, let's use it. Let's use it. Let's do it. Like, really, we have something to offer inside of recovery. And it's so empowering and so exciting. And there's so much, you get so much collateral building a therapeutic alliance. So briefly about ROIs. Sometimes a client, when they come in, the fear is so palpable, the shame is so big, maybe they physically feel really, really off, and they are like, don't want to sign an ROI. Knowing that that particular moment is not generalizable for their entire experience inside of treatment. So we can circle back, right? And have a conversation, find out what function is it serving them to not sign an ROI, and then be able to meet that need. So some common concerns might be like, they've done enough, or I think I want to separate or divorce from them, or like they use, right? They drink, or I don't want to get yelled at. I always get yelled at. Those are like common concerns. And then there's some unspoken ones that are more internal. Like they will tell you things that I want to protect, or I'm afraid I will let them down again. You will see a side of my family that I don't want you to witness. They're actually protective of their family. And these concerns are real. And so when you can validate and address those concerns and give them the safety to know that you've got them and you're there, they will sign an ROI because it's part of their treatment, because they know that you've communicated, like being connected to the outside world. And if it's not going to be that person, then it needs to be someone else. Like, come up, we're going to need to get creative and come up with more people, right? You'll get an ROI, and you can help them practice a skill before and after hanging out with their family on the phone or on video or in person. Is like, okay, how are we feeling? Feeling anxious? Okay, let's do some calming skills. Are you like shutting down? Let's do some activation skills, and we will check in with each other during our conversation to see how it's going. Sometimes I feel it first, and I see it, and I'll pause and be like, "Hey, I just want to check in with everyone because I'm feeling like a lot going on in this conversation, and I just want to know, like, is this normal? Is this the way you guys do things?" 99% of the time, they're like, "Yeah, this is the way we do things." I'm like, "Okay, so this is a me thing, not them, right? This is what they do," and so then you can begin to support that family inside of their recovery. So actually making those phone calls, right? That initial phone call. What do you say? How do you do it? Introduce yourself, explain how the sessions will run, strength-based, goal-directed, right? We're not going to talk about what happened 30 years ago, right? We're not going to do that. We can't hold that space for you at this early side of treatment. I always like to think about these phone calls and this containment conversation think about how you are so effective at running good groups that don't get derailed. What is it that you're doing? It's setting up those exits. So trauma informed. If you've been to any of our trauma informed CEUs over this past year, that's a reoccurring theme, right? Um, Rules of the call, purpose of the call. I'm personally a fan of instead of so how are you doing today? Which depending on how long you've been doing this, that can go a lot of places, right? But I'm a real fan of the 2-word check-in. If you had to give me 2 words that describes how you're doing today, what would those 2 words be? Right. And then you have the opportunity then to explore further or take it and kind of store it so that it gives you information about their own emotional regulation space. The way we interact with families does tend to betray our own family bias. Are we afraid of cutting off a dad? Are we afraid of minimizing an irate wife? Right? Are we giving extra validation to the quiet person in the room? Right? A lot of the things that we do with our families is telling us how it is that we also interact with our own families. It's just curious, just interesting, something to keep in mind, something to seek supervision with if you feel like it gets in the way of your ability to do family work. All right, I'm sidetracked here. So validate that where there's a lot of pain with a disease, but with a limited time to treatment, do we focus on how they could support themselves and their loved ones' recovery. At Promises, we offer these webinars so that the families can begin their own recovery process that then they can then bring back to their loved one in a conversation during family phone calls and sessions. Let them know that you're aware that emotions run high and to provide safety in the session. If emotions get high, you will help redirect to the goals identified. You can make the call with the patient or meet with the patient first and then call the family with them. I always lean towards having the client there because as a trauma-informed space, the transparency is there and it saves a lot of time. The S word, support. We talk about it all the time. Everyone's like, I'm so supportive. I support. What is support, right? So for those families that are eager to support, so we could talk about a couple different types of families, but those that are eager to support their loved one, they're like, tell me how, right? Remembering that it's not the family's job to make their loved one better, right? However, we can't and we shouldn't shame them or stop them from loving their person. Finding new ways to express their love that is supportive in recovery is really helpful. This level of family work might not be achieved at the residential level of care, but we can begin to recognize, regulate, so they can respond. Starts with education, encouraging families to get educated about addiction, right? Or whatever mental health diagnosis that their loved one might have. This sets up realistic expectations and hope. And it also can help them see a little bit more about themselves and how they fit inside of that system. We encourage families to get involved in their own support groups and their own treatment. Then we identify progress. This is my favorite part. It's what makes the world go around here, folks, right? Identify the progress, even the small steps. It's okay to be happy. It is okay to be happy today. Families are often afraid to enjoy the progress for fear of the old behaviors. And when we can, essentially give them permission to be happy on a good day, that is so hopeful and empowering to our families because they've been living inside of their fight or flight, their amygdalas pumping cortisol and adrenaline through their blood all of the time, right? And they don't know how to feel good, and they don't trust it when they do. And so you're like, it's good to feel good, and let's enjoy it. Supporting our families. So recognizing the therapeutic reasons for families' apprehension to participate, right? For those families that are less eager to support, what's going on? These things, right? They might say, why? Nothing ever changes. Okay, so they feel it is their fault that it hasn't worked in the past. And as it hasn't worked in the past, if they had been included in the past and it didn't work, they're like, that's their fear, right? Or I need a break. They feel they will be given more things to do, right? if you know what's behind the statement, what is it you fear? They might say, I was told I need firmer boundaries. This one always makes me look side-eyed a little bit because they really don't know what they want the boundaries to be. So they're going to do what someone they trust, probably not you yet, says should be their boundaries. Like he needs to sleep in the bed that he made. It's too pain. Well, I'll get to that in a second. But the boundaries thing. So when people say I need to have firmer boundaries, and I say, well, let's talk about that. They like my friend told me I need to do this or I need to do that. I need to do this, right? So they don't trust themselves to be able to come up with boundaries that align with their own value system, and so that comes across as a way to protect their fear. They another one that I'll hear sometimes when families are like, he needs to sleep in the bed he made, right? So what are they saying? They are saying it is too painful to watch, so I need to separate from it, right? So if we can help them navigate that painful option and engage in family work, or she has no idea how this has affected us. They don't trust that what you want to do with them isn't going to re-traumatize them, right? That trust, it's fear, anger, secrets, all of that. So being able to validate their experience and give them parameters in which we are going to stay can be really helpful in getting buy-in and supportive. And then if they're still like, no, I can't. You're like, that is really helpful information for me to know because then we're going to look for someone who really will stand alongside them. And for you to be able to take care of yourself in a way that it feels safe for you. It does not feel safe for you to be involved, then we're going to help them find someone who can. You need that information. It's really helpful to you as a therapist as you're putting together a treatment team, a treatment plan, and knowing how to work alongside of your of and work through the grief that your client is going to feel in feeling that. How is this a systemic issue? Little systems theory, recognizing the complexity of the relational patterns and alter them to bring about productive change for the entire family. Think about feedback loops. It's a common construct. He does this, I do that, she does that, he does this happens, this happens, this happens, this is how it's resolved, and then rinse and repeat, right? When we move inside of recovery, we're changing, someone is changing that feedback loop. When someone changes that something inside that feedback loop, then the whole loop has to change. Or bully the part that changed into coming back and doing what they've always done so that we can not have to change and stay inside homeostasis. And so if we can have multiple different ways to meet recovery, we can hit a lot of different places that can change and to be able to adjust, then those feedback loops can break down into being something healthier for their family and more higher functioning for that family. Because there's a constant pull towards homeostasis. And we know that across the board. So the nuts and bolts, being able to talk about like your goals of the session, which I always like, the data gives you as a therapist, the plan for education and curiosity. What are you addressing on the treatment team? What is the family progressing on? What still needs to be addressed in the next family session to help support? Great. Then there's the assessment, reflecting on your process. This is really helpful, particularly for like you are, right? Because they want to know, is this the right level of care? Like, what are you noticing that needs to be addressed? Where do you think this family is in their ability to help support recovery? Right? Plan, next steps. This is really helpful for the client and the family. It gives them a thing to do and to think about. What specific intervention and skills are we going to work on? What specifically will be the next session that we're going to address? What concerns do you have if they are not? What are the risk factors? Flying through these last couple slides here just because we're out of time. Going to skip this one. How treatment outcomes are increased by enhanced family involvement. This is the last this is the last objective that we talked about at the beginning of this PowerPoint. Recovery language is accessible to all. Otherwise, the patient returns to a family stuck in chaos and homeostasis wins out. And the system has the awareness of red flags, green flags. You want to know more about red flags, green flags? Come to my webinar on Tuesday night on protective factors and risk factors, and we talk about that. I'm just going to put that little flag out there. Family, number 2, family engagement encourages care coordination. Super important, right? Because if someone else besides the patient understands the next step, accountability improves, right? Follow through improves. And if the family supports the plan, then the patient guilt diffuses. What do I mean by that? Many times patients will not engage in an aftercare plan that is necessary because they are afraid of what their family that will be mad at them, that won't understand, that can't support them. And so being part of that conversation move on helps our client to be okay with being able to take care of themselves. Number three, the system begins the recovery process. My favorite part, right? Because as a system therapist, this is what I love to see. It's a diffusion of responsibility in a good way. It isn't just one thing that got us here, and it's just not one thing that will get us well. And effective boundaries can be negotiated based off of members' value systems instead of reacting to a crisis. We cannot hold boundaries that push back against our value system. Provide education, teach skills, bring family into sessions to help with communications, build stronger relationships to support recovery behaviors. And why do we do all of this? To provide hope to families. Out with the old, in with the new. The new science shows kindness, positive reinforcement, and motivational and behavioral strategies can help families support their loved ones' recovery. Using the transformative power of relationships for positive change to remind us that although no one can change another person, we can help in inspiring that change. Just like moving into if you ever moved into a brand new house and it feels a little icky, doesn't feel like home yet, because we don't have new memories yet. But as we build new memories inside of that new home, inside of that home of recovery, it starts to feel normal and it starts to feel good. And that is what we hope for. So our final slide for today. What are our takeaways for families and treatment providers? Families want to be involved but might lack their own support. Participants need support in how to engage families in ways that are supportive and meaningful. Fear on both sides can be one of the greatest barriers. Ensuring family members are present as crucial updates are shared, and provide family education and support resources and referrals. Thank you so much for being here. I only went 1 minute over. I'm going to look at the questions real quick, and we will be good. Let's see. That's a good one. I work in corrections and I have a client who was a drug addict. I'm assuming was, meaning like he's in recovery now. And when he's released, he will return home to where his mother is an active addict. How do I counsel him? Again, back to his needs. Is he moving in with, why is he moving back in with his mom, right? Being able to meet what needs. Does he need help finding an additional situation? Why does he feel like being able to speak to, what are you going to do? Like that red flag, green flag. What are your indications that this is not healthy for you so that you know what it is that you're going to do? If you're like, I'm going to move back home, I can handle it. Like, what are your indications that you can't, and what is your plan? Right, is helping him coming up with a contingency plan if he is insistent on moving home. Because if there's no therapy happening, it's really hard to have those kind of conversations. But to counsel on him is having a contingency plan. What is he going to do if and when, and making sure that he has the support to be able to do that. And how can we point our own family to a provider we trust? How can we point our own family to a provider we trust? I'm guessing this is a personal question. Not sure how to answer that one. I'm sorry. I'm not sure what the question is. Lastly, is it okay to share some personal information with clients as if they ask? Personal information, your personal information, or between the families and the clients? If everybody's in the room, we can if you're thinking like, I know something about the family or the client, and I want the family to know, it's a conversation, being like, hey, we had a conversation about this topic. Can we go ahead and share that with your family now? Right? Like it's a conversation. It's trauma informed. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but yeah, it's a conversation, right? There's no going behind. You don't want to triangulate. You don't want to split, right? Because that really harms your therapeutic relationship. There are any other questions? What do we got? Anything else?
No. Thanks, Wendy. think that was great. A lot of
Welcome.
great feedback. Just to close out, I will have this survey out to you all in the next couple of hours. So look out for your emails. And if you don't receive something by today, either saying you've received the survey or you did not meet the requirement, please send me an email or email pbhu@promises.com. Happy holidays. Thank you all for being here. Wendy, you can end the webinar whenever you're ready.
Okie dokie, thank you.
Thanks, everybody.